We've got two Spider-Man Epic Collections coming out in January, and these are two important volumes, and I'll tell you why in a second. But let me tell you first, though, this one, The Invasion of the Spider Slayers, Volume 24, is coming out on January 4, and this one, Volume 23, is coming out on January 18. Now, what makes these two very important? Well, these are the two missing volumes that will complete the David Michelinie run. That's right, everything that David Michelinie has done for Amazing Spider-Man through the 90s is collected in 10 Epic Collections, and that is just an absolutely remarkable feat. These are coming out in reverse order. Volume 24 is coming before Volume 23, but they're so close together that it really doesn't matter that much. Volume 23 is the debut of Carnage, and it has a great crossover with the New Warriors. And this one here is a 6-part story where the Spider Slayers come back, and they're just even deadlier than ever. Also, it's the return of someone from Peter's past who we all thought was dead. Okay, we've got two Spider-Man volumes to look at, so let's get started. Let's start with Volume 23, The Hero Killers. Check out this great Mark Bagley cover. Mark Bagley is in his prime right now, I think. This is some of his most definitive work. And also, for me, it's a definitive Spider-Man. This is the way he drew the character and his world. Let's take a look at the back cover. We can see that it has just a few issues of Spider-Man because there's actually a lot going on. A super fat annual, Soul of the Hunter, which is a sequel to Kraven's Last Hunt, and then big annual crossover story. So there's just a lot going on here, plus some extra size issues here and there. The first 3 issues, here's the debut of Carnage, one of the most popular characters to be created by Marvel in the 90s. Mark Bagley has such a great look to this character, and it is a really fun story where Venom comes back and there's just a lot of action. Then after that, we move into the annual story called The Hero Killers, in which Spider-Man teams up with the New Warriors in order to battle a threat. This book also includes some of the bonus features, the backup stories in the annuals that have to do with Solo and Venom. It's a multi-part story that stretches across all the annuals as well. After we finish with the annuals, we get to the graphic novel called Soul of the Hunter, which is a sequel to Kraven's Last Hunt. And then a few random issues at the back featuring the Shocker and the Lizard. And then a supersized 30th anniversary issue. Who had this one with the hologram cover? You remember that? Then we get a story with Taskmaster bringing on a bunch of random supervillain characters. Let's talk about Invasion of the Spider Slayers. Here's another great cover from Mark Bagley. And on the back, again, just a few issues here as Amazing Spider-Man, because we get an extra size annual, another graphic novel, Spider-Man and Doctor Strange, The Way to Dusty Death, and then Spider-Man Special Edition, The Trial of Venom. There's also like some supersized issues in here because of 375th issue. Here's a look at the graphic novel, The Way to Dusty Death, written by Roy Thomas and Jerry Conway, with artwork by Michael Baer. It is a very trippy, out-of-this-world graphic novel story. The Trial of Venom by Peter David and Jim Craig features Daredevil as they battle together against Venom. And then we get into the big story, Invasion of the Spider Slayers. And if you are a fan of the 90s animated series, you'll recognize Alistair Smythe in his cool chair. And that comes from this storyline right here. Great designs on the Spider Slayers as Mark Bagley brings back some other characters like Scorpion and the Black Cat. And then, of course, Venom returns, as he always does, at least once per volume, it seems, to have another little round with Spider-Man. And this is right before he moves over to San Francisco to start up his own superhero career in the miniseries Lethal Protector. Then we have some fill-in issues by Stephen Grant and Jeff Johnson featuring Cardiac and these 2 other villains called Sticks and Stones. I actually really like Cardiac's design. His character could have been a little better, but I really liked him in the 90s. Then wrapping it up with one Lizard story. So as you can see, I'm surrounded by Spider-Man Epic Collections. There are so many out now, but what do we have and what do we still need? To start us off, we have the very first 2 volumes of Spider-Man, and these are the Steve Ditko and Stan Lee era Spider-Man, the creators. This is the beginning of Spider-Man. We see his origin story, we meet his villains for the first time, we learn all about teenage Peter Parker, and it's collected in 2 really handy volumes. It's all Stan Lee and Steve Ditko in these ones, so if that's all you're looking for, it's a perfect way to collect it. And after that, we have 6 volumes that take us through the mid-70s. Volume 3 and 4 is when John Romita takes over for Steve Ditko, and this is a lot of people consider to be the definitive Spider-Man. Peter Parker in college. This is the introduction to Mary Jane. This is when Peter Parker's working at the Daily Bugle. Volume 3 has the landmark 50th issue where Peter Parker decides he doesn't want to be Spider-Man anymore. Volume 5 and 6 is more of the same. We're going to get more of Stan Lee and more John Romita. And then in Volume 6, we see Gil Kane starting to take up some of the penciling duties as well. And Roy Thomas will fill in for a few issues here and there. Volume 7 and 8 is an important era for Spider-Man as it is a transition from Stan Lee to Jerry Conway. It's a new era for Spider-Man when one of his co-creators is not writing the character anymore. Volume 7 in particular, very important story. I'm sure you've heard of the death of Gwen Stacy, and if you haven't, I'm sorry I just spoiled it for you. You want to check that out though. Volume 9 is on the schedule. It's called Spider-Man vs. Spider-Clone. It's the very first clone saga, and that one is going to be coming out in 2013, so keep your eyes open for that. And then after Volume 9, we have a big gap. We don't have anything from Volume 10 to 14 until we get to this one in here, Volume 15, Ghosts of the Past. This is the Tom DeFalco and Ron Frenz era. They make a great team. They're some of my favorite creators. This is a great volume if you want to learn more about them. And then there's a 1-volume gap between Volume 15 and Volume 17. Amazing Spider-Man Volume 16 is one of the epic collections that is most frequently asked for, and Marvel isn't giving it to us yet. Volume 17 is the start of a really long run of epic collections. This is the Michelini run that I mentioned earlier, but it starts with the very famous story Kraven's Last Hunt by J.M. DeMatteis and Mike Zeck, in which Kraven bests Spider-Man and tries to take over his role. Incredible story. Definitely the highlight of this one, except for the fact that this also includes the wedding of Mary Jane and Peter Parker. And it's the conclusion to the long-running Hobgoblin story that, when we get these volumes filled in, will be a very important storyline in Spider-Man's history. Like I said, David Michelini takes over, and pretty soon, joining him pretty quickly, is Todd McFarlane. Todd McFarlane, of course, is one of the great Spider-Man artists of the 90s, and they co-create this character called Venom. He appears in Volume 18. And in Volume 19, there's a big story called The Assassination Plot with Silver Sable, Captain America, and a bunch of other characters. You'll probably want to check that one out if you like 90s action. Now we're coming to Volume 20 and 21. Volume 20 is actually the first Spider-Man epic collection that was released. It's also the Acts of Vengeance era of Spider-Man, when he gains some cosmic powers. And this volume serves as a transition between Todd McFarlane and Eric Larson. And Eric Larson takes over the penciling duties with Volume 21, where he brings back the Sinister Six, believe it or not, for the first time since the 60s. Then we have Volume 22 and 23. This one's called Round Robin. It's actually going to get reprinted later on in 2023. It has a big summertime story where a bunch of characters like Moon Knight and Punisher and Darkhawk, they all get together with Spider-Man to defeat one of Moon Knight's foes. And then, of course, I've already talked about Volume 23, The Hero Killers. We're not done yet, but my pile is so big that I gotta move it out of my way. 3 volumes left. I've already talked about Amazing Spider-Man Volume 24, Invasion of the Spider Slayers. Then after that is the very famous story, Maximum Carnage, where Carnage returns and he brings a bunch of baddies with him, and this crossover spans all 4 of the Spider-Man titles that were being published at this time, and they're all collected in this one volume. And then Volume 26 is the aftermath of Maximum Carnage. We meet a couple of new villains, and this is also the end of the David Michelini run, who was on this title for, I think, almost 8 years or something like that. It was a long time, and he did a lot to cement the legacy of Spider-Man and all of us who grew up through the 90s reading comic books. These epic collections stop exactly where the complete Clone Saga epic trade paperbacks start. So if you want to continue collecting Amazing Spider-Man exactly where you left off, you'll want this 5-volume set that's called the Complete Clone Saga Epic. And after that is a 6-volume set called the Complete Ben Reilly Saga, and that is a lot of Spider-Man. So there you go. This is 19 Amazing Spider-Man Epic Collections out of 26. We've still got a few to go. It's going to take a few more years to get that all sorted out, but in the meantime, you've got lots of reading to do. Thanks for watching my video.